You wake up tired, not just in your body but in places rest never seems to reach. Your mind feels crowded, your heart feels heavy, and somewhere deep inside you carry a quiet question you barely dare to speak aloud. If I am truly called, why do I feel so small right now? This is the inner contradiction you live in. On the outside, you keep moving, fulfilling responsibilities, smiling when required. On the inside, you feel worn down, uncertain, even invisible. Yet at the same time, there is a pull you cannot escape, a whisper that refuses to go silent, a sense that your life is not random, even when it feels disordered. You are tired, but not finished. You feel lost, but not abandoned. You feel weak, yet marked. This is the paradox of the chosen season you are in. You are being summoned while you feel depleted. You are being led while you don't understand the map. And this contradiction is not a mistake. It is the evidence that something holy is unfolding beneath your exhaustion. You have tried to reason your way out of this tension. You've told yourself that if the calling were real, you would feel strong, confident, prepared. But instead, you feel stretched thin. You feel like your prayers barely rise above the ceiling. You feel like everyone else seems to move forward with clarity while you are stuck navigating fog. And yet, despite all of that, you are still here, still listening, still searching, still drawn to something higher than comfort or familiarity. This is where many walk away, when the calling doesn't come wrapped in adrenaline or instant clarity, when it arrives quietly in the middle of weariness. Most people assume they missed God, but you didn't miss Him. You encountered Him in a way that strips you of self-reliance. Because if you felt strong right now, you would trust your strength. If you felt certain, you would trust your logic. But because you feel weak, you are being positioned to trust something greater than yourself. You don't feel chosen because you've been measuring calling by energy instead of obedience. Calling is not proven by how powerful you feel. It is proven by how you respond when you feel powerless. Heaven often begins its greatest work when your natural reserves run dry. That exhaustion you feel is not a sign of failure. It is the sound of old supports breaking so divine guidance can take their place. You are not confused because you are off course. You are confused because you are between what was familiar and what has not yet been revealed. The mind hates this space, but the spirit recognizes it. This is the narrow passage where identity is refined, where ego is quieted, where dependence shifts. You are being taught to follow without full visibility, to move without full comprehension. And that is not punishment, that is preparation. You may feel overlooked, but you are actually being hidden. Hidden from distraction, hidden from premature exposure, hidden so the work can go deep before it goes public. God often conceals His chosen ones during their weakest feeling seasons, not to delay them, but to protect what is being formed within them. The world crowns too early. Heaven waits until the foundation can carry the weight. There is a reason you feel both drawn forward and pulled inward at the same time. One part of you is being called upward, while another part is being emptied. This tension is sacred. It is the place where surrender replaces striving, where trust replaces control, where you learn that guidance does not always come with explanations, but it always comes with purpose. You don't need to understand everything to be led. You only need to stay responsive. The voice guiding you right now is not shouting, it is steady. It does not demand that you feel ready. It only asks that you remain willing. Willing to take the next step even when the next 10 steps are hidden. Willing to believe that weakness does not disqualify you but qualifies you for divine strength. We are reminded through the writings of David in the Psalms. Chapter 34, verse 19. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. This is not a promise that the chosen avoid struggle. It is a declaration that struggle does not get the final word. Your weariness is not the conclusion of your story. It is a chapter that proves you are righteous enough to be refined and loved enough to be delivered. So don't despise this moment. Don't rush past it. Don't shame yourself for feeling tired while being called. This is the season where false strength falls away and true reliance is born. You are being led, even now, even here, even while you don't fully understand what is happening. If this resonates with you, take a step of agreement, like the video, share it with someone who needs reassurance, and subscribe to stay connected to this flow. And as a sign of alignment, comment the number 77 below. Not out of superstition, but as a declaration that you choose to trust the leading, even without full clarity. You are still walking through the haze, but now the invitation deepens. This season is not asking you to run faster or figure everything out. It is asking you to learn how to ask the right questions. Not desperate questions fueled by fear, but grounded questions shaped by trust. In times of clarity, answers come easily. In times of calling mixed with confusion, questions become the tool of formation. Most people ask, "Why is this happening to me?" That question drains strength because it keeps your focus locked on circumstances. It assumes something has gone wrong, but you are being trained to ask different questions now. Questions that don't demand explanations, but invite alignment. Questions that shift your posture from resistance to receptivity. Instead of asking why the path feels unclear, you learn to ask, "What is this season trying to teach me about dependence?" Instead of asking when the breakthrough will arrive, you begin to ask, "Who am I becoming while I wait?" These questions do not remove the fog immediately, but they anchor you within it. They keep you steady while your eyes adjust to walking by faith rather than by sight. You are not meant to interrogate God in this season. You are meant to inquire with humility. There is a difference. Interrogation demands control. Inquiry invites wisdom. When you demand answers prematurely, you close yourself to transformation. But when you ask gently, with reverence, you allow truth to unfold at the pace your soul can carry. One practical discipline in this season is to pause before reacting. When uncertainty rises, you resist the urge to label it as danger. Instead, you ask, "What response would align me with trust rather than fear?" This question rewires your instincts. It trains you to respond from conviction rather than emotion. Over time, you begin to recognize that not every unanswered question is a threat. Some are invitations to maturity. Another guiding question is this: what is within my control today and what must I release? Ambiguity often feels overwhelming because you try to carry tomorrow's weight with today's strength. You are not designed for that. Clarity comes in portions. Grace comes daily. When you focus on what is required of you now, today's obedience, today's integrity, today's faithfulness, you lighten the load without abandoning the journey. You also learn to ask, what distractions am I being asked to lay down? Fog has a way of revealing attachments. When the noise fades, the things you leaned on for identity or reassurance become obvious. This is not exposure for humiliation. It is exposure for healing. Some comforts must loosen their grip so that guidance can take their place. There will be moments when silence stretches longer than you expect. In those moments, instead of asking, "Why is God quiet?" you ask, "What is He strengthening in me while I wait?" Silence is not absence. It is often concentration. Heaven does not waste quiet. It uses it to deepen roots so that when movement resumes, you are not easily shaken. Another essential question in this season is Kom Idacom. Am I seeking relief or alignment? Relief wants discomfort to end. Alignment wants purpose to be fulfilled. Relief asks for shortcuts. Alignment accepts process. When you learn to distinguish between the two, your prayers shift. You stop asking for escape and start asking for endurance, wisdom, and clarity of heart. You are also invited to ask, what truth do I already know but have not yet applied? Many times the next instruction does not come because the last one is still waiting for obedience. This is not punishment, it is order. Revelation builds upon response. When you live what you already understand, deeper insight follows naturally. You may notice that as your questions change, your anxiety lessens. Not because everything makes sense, but because your trust deepens. You are no longer demanding certainty as proof of guidance. You are learning to recognize guidance by peace, consistency, and inner alignment. You begin to sense when a step is right, even if it is not fully explained. This is how discernment matures. Not through constant confirmation, but through practiced attentiveness. You listen more carefully. You move more deliberately. You become less reactive and more responsive. And slowly, almost quietly, you realize that the fog did not come to stop you. It came to slow you enough to learn how to walk with intention. According to what is revealed in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. This is not a command to abandon thinking. It is an invitation to stop placing ultimate trust in your own conclusions. Understanding will come, but trust must come first. You are being shaped into someone who can carry clarity without pride and ambiguity without panic. Someone who knows how to ask questions that keep the heart soft and the spirit open. This season is teaching you that guidance does not always arrive as answers. Sometimes it arrives as better questions asked in faith and held with patience. And as you continue forward, you discover that the right questions do more than seek direction. They form you into someone capable of receiving it. There was a stretch of history where heaven seemed silent. Not for a year, not for a generation, but for 400 years. After the final words of the prophets in the Old Testament, there were no new recorded revelations, no fresh prophetic voices rising to address the people publicly, no visions etched into scripture, no audible declarations from God to the nation. Many assumed God had withdrawn. Others believed he had finished speaking, but the truth was far more precise. God was silent because he was preparing something so exact, so layered, so world-altering that noise would have interfered with the process. This is where your current season finds its parallel. Those 400 years were not empty. They were active beneath the surface. Empires rose and fell. Roads were built. Languages unified. Political systems shifted. Rome established infrastructure that would later allow a message to travel farther and faster than ever before. Synagogues spread across regions, creating places where scripture was already known. Hearts were growing weary of religion without power. Humanity was being positioned, not entertained. Silence did not mean absence. Silence meant alignment. You must understand this because when you feel like heaven is quiet in your life, you instinctively assume delay or disapproval. But biblical history tells a different story. God often speaks least when he is arranging most. The intertestamental silence was not a pause in divine interest. It was a strategic compression of time and events, all moving toward one precise moment. When the silence broke, it did not break with an explanation, it broke with a birth. Jesus did not arrive with a trumpet blast to kings. He arrived in obscurity to a teenage girl in a backwater town. But when he arrived, The silence made sense. Every law, every prophecy, every ache, every unanswered prayer pointed toward him. The quiet had sharpened the hunger. The waiting had clarified the need. This is what silence does when you let it work properly. It strips away casual faith. It exposes shallow expectations. It teaches you to recognize fulfillment when it finally appears. Even if it does not look how you imagined, during those 400 years, many people died never hearing another prophetic word. And yet their lives were still part of the preparation. Not everyone who waits sees the breakthrough, but everyone who remains faithful contributes to it. That truth reframes how you view your own waiting. Your obedience now may be laying groundwork for answers that arrive later than you expect, in forms you cannot predict, through people you may never meet. This historical silence also reveals something uncomfortable. God does not rush to reassure human impatience. If he did, the fullness of time would never be reached. Scripture tells us that Jesus came at the exact moment history was ready, not when anxiety peaked, not when questions were loudest, but when alignment was complete. The same principle applies to you. The quiet you experience is not God ignoring your prayers. It is God timing his response. Timing is not about delay. It is about readiness, your character, your discernment, your capacity to steward what is coming. Silence matures those things in ways constant instruction never could. Think of how dangerous revelation would be without preparation. Think of how destructive power would be without humility. The 400 years taught humanity how to long without controlling, how to hope without demanding, how to remain faithful without constant confirmation. You are learning that same lesson now. You are discovering that silence forces you to examine why you follow God in the first place. Is it for clarity, or for truth, for comfort, or for alignment? When the voice quiets, motives surface. And once motives are purified, direction can be trusted. When the silence finally broke in Scripture, it did not begin with Jesus preaching. It began with John the Baptist crying out in the wilderness. A voice preparing the way, not explaining the delay. That matters. God did not justify the silence. He fulfilled the promise. And fulfillment always speaks louder than explanation. The ancient words recorded in the book of Galatians, chapter 4, verse 4, still echo today. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, not early, not late, fullness, completion, precision. You are not behind, you are not forgotten, you are not stalled. You are inside a pattern that Scripture has already revealed. Silence is not punishment, it is refinement. It is history's reminder that God works on scales larger than individual urgency, yet never loses sight of individual obedience. Now, here is where response matters. If you are in a quiet season right now, and this perspective shifts how you see it, anchor it with a declaration. Comment one short phrase below, no more than 4 words, as an act of alignment. For example, I will wait, or trust the timing, or prepared in silence. This is not about engagement. It is about articulation. When you name what you believed, you reinforce it internally. Words clarify posture. Declarations settle the heart. By choosing a simple phrase, you are not trying to hurry the silence away. You are choosing to stand steady within it. History proves that silence does not cancel promise, it concentrates it. And when it breaks, it will not whisper. There comes a phase in the journey where the guidance becomes unmistakable, yet deeply uncomfortable. Not because the direction is unclear, but because it requires separation. You begin to notice that what once fit no longer does. Conversations feel shallow. Environments feel noisy. Relationships that were once energizing now feel draining. This is not arrogance, and it is not rejection. It is adjustment. Elevation always demands distance from habits, from voices, from patterns that cannot rise with you. Separation is one of the most misunderstood tools God uses. People often interpret it as loss, punishment, or abandonment. But in Scripture and in life, separation is almost always a sign of preparation. Before God elevates, He isolates not to harm, but to refine, not to diminish, but to clarify. When distractions fall away, purpose becomes louder. You may feel misunderstood in this season. Others may not recognize why you've changed or why you no longer show up the same way. They might say you've become distant, serious, or withdrawn. What they don't see is that something sacred is being rearranged inside you. You are not pulling away from people, you are being pulled closer to alignment. Elevation without separation creates instability. If you were lifted while still entangled in old dependencies, the weight of what's coming would collapse you. God separates you not because you are weak, but because what you are being prepared for is strong. Separation is not a statement about your worth, it is a statement about your capacity. Think about how gold is refined. It must be separated from impurities through heat. The heat doesn't destroy the gold, it reveals it. In the same way, this season may feel intense, lonely, or stretching, but it is exposing what truly belongs in your life and what cannot go with you into the next phase. You might be tempted to reconnect with what is familiar just to ease the discomfort. Familiarity feels safe, even when it limits growth. But every time you resist returning to what no longer fits, you strengthen discernment. You are learning to value peace over approval, purpose over popularity, obedience over explanation. This separation also teaches you how to hear God more clearly. When external noise quiets, internal guidance sharpens, you start recognizing the difference between your own thoughts and divine nudges. You become less reactive and more intentional. The isolation creates space, not emptiness, but room. Room for wisdom. Room for healing. Room for vision. Elevation is never about status, it is about responsibility. And responsibility requires maturity. That maturity is formed in seasons where no one is applauding, affirming, or even noticing. Hidden seasons are not wasted seasons, they are foundational. What is built in secret sustains what is revealed in public. You are not being separated because you are better than others. You are being separated because your assignment is different. And difference requires distinction. The temptation is to explain yourself, to justify the changes, to make others comfortable. But this season is not about being understood by people. It is about being aligned with God. Even Jesus withdrew from crowds before major moments of ministry. Elevation followed isolation. Power followed prayer. Visibility followed obedience. The pattern is consistent. Separation is not a detour, it is part of the route. The Spirit spoke through the prophet Isaiah, chapter 52, verse 11. Depart, depart, go out from there, touch no unclean thing. This was not a command rooted in fear, but in readiness. It was a call to step away so something holy could be carried forward without contamination. As you move through this separating season, you may question whether it's worth it. You may wonder if you're overthinking or overcommitting. But clarity comes later. Right now. Your role is faithfulness. To stay true to what you sense is right. Even when it costs comfort. If this message resonates, and if it has brought clarity or reassurance, consider supporting it in a simple, genuine way. Liking the video helps it reach others who may be walking through similar seasons. Sharing it can offer encouragement to someone who feels isolated and unsure. And subscribing allows you to stay connected as these messages continue unfolding. These actions are not obligations, they are ways of participating in a community shaped by growth and discernment. Remember, this separation is temporary, but elevation leaves an imprint. What you are learning now, how to stand alone, how to listen deeply, how to obey quietly, will serve you when responsibility increases and visibility expands. You are not being set aside, you are being set apart. And when the time comes to rise, you will do so without confusion, without compromise, and without needing to look back. There comes a moment in every calling where the test is no longer about endurance, but allegiance. Not whether you can survive hardship, but whether you will remain faithful when an easier option presents itself. This is the kind of test that doesn't announce itself as temptation. It arrives dressed as relief, as logic, as a reasonable compromise, and if you don't discern it correctly, you may mistake comfort for confirmation. These tests often appear after seasons of separation. Once you've been alone long enough, once the weight of isolation presses in, something familiar tries to re-enter your life. An old pattern, an old relationship, an old mindset. It promises rest without obedience, peace without surrender, reward without process. And the question quietly forms in your spirit: will you choose what feels good or what aligns with truth? This is where allegiance is revealed. God does not test you to see if you will fail. He tests you to expose what has already taken root in your heart. Tests bring clarity. They show you whether your faith is circumstantial or covenantal, whether your devotion depends on outcomes or on obedience, whether you follow God for what He gives or for who He is. You may notice that these tests often come when you are tired, not at your strongest, but at your most vulnerable. This is intentional. Allegiance proven only in strength is incomplete. Allegiance proven in weakness is genuine. When you are tired, stripped of excess motivation, what you choose comes from your core. Some tests will ask you to choose between speed and integrity. Others will ask you to choose between approval and obedience. Still others will ask you to choose between silence and self-promotion. None of these choices are neutral. Each one shapes the direction of your future, even if the consequences are not immediate. This is why discernment matters so deeply in this season. Not every open door is sent by God. Not every opportunity is aligned. Some doors open to see whether you are desperate enough to walk through them without asking who opened them. Allegiance pauses when it prays. It weighs peace over pressure. You may feel internal tension when these tests arise. One voice urges you to act quickly, to secure comfort, to end the waiting. Another voice calls you to remain steady, even if it costs you convenience. That tension is not confusion. It is the battlefield where loyalty is refined. Think about how often Scripture shows God allowing choices that reveal the heart. He does not force obedience, He invites it. And invitation always carries the possibility of refusal, but refusal never goes unnoticed. Every compromise teaches the soul what it is willing to trade destiny for. The good news is this: recognizing the test is already a sign of growth. Earlier in your journey, you might have walked straight into compromise without resistance. Now, you pause, you question, you feel the weight of the decision. That awareness is maturity forming. You are learning that allegiance is not proven in declarations alone, but in decisions made when no one is watching. When obedience costs you something tangible. When faith means saying no to something that could solve a temporary problem but create a long-term wound. There will be moments when the right choice feels lonely, when doing what aligns with God places you at odds with expectations, yours or others. But loneliness born of obedience is safer than comfort born of compromise. One strengthens your spirit, the other slowly erodes it. This is also where identity is sealed. When you consistently choose alignment over ease, something shifts internally. You stop negotiating with temptation. You stop needing constant reassurance. You begin to trust the discernment God has been forming in you through every prior season. The apostle reminds us in his letter recorded in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. This verse is not about avoiding tests. It is about surviving them without surrendering allegiance. The test is allowed, but the limit is set by faithfulness. You are not being tested because you are weak. You are being tested because you are ready to choose. Heaven does not waste tests on people who have no future responsibility. Allegiance must be proven before authority can be trusted. If you are facing a decision right now, one that looks small on the surface but feels heavy in your spirit, mark this moment. Not with fear, but with intention. Comment the number 999 below as a declaration that you are closing cycles of compromise and choosing alignment over convenience. This is not about superstition. It is about awareness. Numbers become symbols when they anchor a decision in the heart. You are not alone in this testing season. You are being watched over, guided, and strengthened. And every time you choose obedience, even quietly, even imperfectly, you step further into the clarity you've been seeking. Allegiance always precedes elevation, and you are choosing well. Now the journey narrows into something quieter, more demanding. This is the phase where you are asked to move without evidence, to step forward without confirmation, to trust instruction without explanation. The path ahead does not light up all at once. Only the ground beneath your feet becomes visible, just enough for the next step. And everything in you that craves certainty feels exposed. This is where faith stops being an idea and becomes a posture. You are no longer learning what to believe. You are learning how to walk, how to move when clarity lags behind obedience, how to remain steady when logic offers no reassurance, how to trust that direction does not require visibility to be valid. This is not recklessness, it is refinement. Many people confuse faith with optimism. Optimism expects things to turn out well. Faith moves even when outcomes are undefined. Optimism is emotional. Faith is anchored. What you are practicing now is not positive thinking. It is disciplined trust. You are learning to place weight on something you cannot fully see, because you have learned to recognize the voice that is guiding you. This season exposes how deeply you rely on understanding to feel safe. When understanding is removed, insecurity surfaces, questions multiply, doubts whisper. But none of that means you are failing. It means you are being trained to live from conviction rather than comprehension. You may notice how uncomfortable it feels to explain your choices to others now. When you had clarity, explanation came easily. Now, your decisions sound incomplete even to your own ears. That is because they are not built on visible outcomes, they are built on inner alignment. You know why you are moving, but not how everything will unfold. And that has to be enough. This is where many people stall, not because the path disappears, but because pride resists vulnerability. Moving without seeing feels childish to the ego. It feels irresponsible to the mind. But spiritually, it is the highest form of maturity. Children learn to walk by trusting support before they understand balance. In the same way, you are learning to rely before you can articulate. Each unseen step strengthens something in you. Discernment becomes instinct. Dependence becomes natural. Fear loses authority. You begin to recognize that guidance does not always announce itself loudly. Often, it feels like a quiet insistence, a steady pull that does not argue with you but waits for your consent. There will be moments when you pause, hoping clarity will catch up. Sometimes it will, often it won't. And that is intentional. If clarity always arrived before obedience, trust would never deepen. You would only follow when convinced, not when called. You are discovering that faith does not remove uncertainty. It teaches you how to carry it without being ruled by it. You still feel hesitation, but it no longer controls your movement. You still have questions, but they no longer paralyze you. You step anyway. This is also where control loosens its grip. Control demands guarantees. Trust releases timelines. Control asks for proof. Trust responds to presence. When you surrender the need to see everything in advance, you create space for guidance to operate beyond your imagination. There is humility required here. You must accept that you are not meant to understand everything you obey. Some instructions make sense later. Some never fully do. But obedience is not validated by explanation. It is validated by alignment. And alignment carries a peace that logic cannot manufacture. You may notice that progress now feels slower, but deeper. You are not rushing. You are not striving. You are moving with intention. Each step feels deliberate, even when it feels small. This is how endurance is built, not through intensity, but through consistency. Unseen steps also teach patience with yourself. You stop condemning yourself for not having everything figured out. You stop comparing your pace to others. You recognize that your journey requires a different rhythm. A rhythm that prioritizes obedience over appearance. The ancient words recorded in the book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 5, verse 7. Still guide this moment, for we walk by faith, not by sight. This is not poetic language. It is a practical directive. Walking implies movement. Faith implies trust. Sight is not dismissed. It is simply no longer the deciding authority. You are learning to let faith lead and understanding follow. This season reshapes how you define success. Success is no longer reaching a visible milestone. It is remaining responsive. It is moving when prompted. It is stopping when restrained. It is staying open even when the path bends unexpectedly. There is a quiet courage forming in you now. Not the loud courage that announces itself, but the steady courage that shows up day after day. The courage to keep going without applause. The courage to remain faithful without reassurance. The courage to believe that unseen does not mean unsupported. And slowly, almost without noticing, you become someone who can be trusted with more. Not because you demanded clarity, but because you honored guidance. Not because you saw everything, but because you moved anyway. The steps you are taking now may feel invisible to others. They may even feel insignificant to you, but they are shaping a foundation strong enough to hold what is coming. You are not lost in the dark. You are learning to walk by a different light. You have arrived at a place where movement and meaning finally meet. Not because everything is clear, but because you have become clear. Clear in your posture, clear in your allegiance, clear in your willingness to be led even when understanding trails behind. This is the quiet arrival that few recognize at first because it does not come with fireworks. It comes with alignment. You are no longer fighting the process. You are no longer demanding signs to validate every step. Somewhere along the way, resistance softened into trust. Anxiety loosened its grip. The need to control outcomes gave way to the discipline of obedience. And now, without fanfare, you realize something profound. You are standing exactly where you are meant to be. This does not mean the journey is over. It means the foundation is set. You are different now. Not louder, not more impressive, but steadier. Your faith no longer depends on emotional highs or constant reassurance. You have learned how to remain anchored in seasons of uncertainty. You have learned how to listen without rushing, how to wait without wasting, how to move without seeing the full picture. This is what it means to be led. Being led does not remove responsibility, it refines it. You are now accountable to the growth you have undergone, to the discernment you have gained, to the humility that has replaced urgency. You cannot return to old patterns without feeling the misalignment immediately. What once felt normal would now feel heavy. That is not restriction. That is maturity. You are also beginning to recognize how your journey quietly affects others. Not through preaching, but through presence. Not through explanations, but through consistency. People notice when someone walks with peace in uncertainty. They notice when someone does not panic in ambiguity. They notice when someone moves forward without arrogance or fear. Your life becomes a signal not pointing to yourself, but pointing beyond you. This is where purpose becomes embodied. You are not led so that you can feel special. You are led so that you can become trustworthy. Trustworthy with influence. Trustworthy with responsibility. Trustworthy with truth. God does not guide carelessly. He guides with intention, shaping people who can carry clarity without pride and authority without control. You may still have moments where questions surface. That will never fully stop. But the questions no longer destabilize you. They coexist with trust. You have learned that faith is not the absence of questions. It is the decision not to let questions override obedience. And now, as this chapter settles, you are invited to remain attentive. Guidance does not end when alignment is reached. It deepens. The voice becomes subtler. The instructions become more internal. You are expected to discern, not just receive, to steward, not just follow. This is where many miss the transition. They expect guidance to always feel dramatic, but mature leading often feels ordinary. It feels like daily faithfulness, like quiet consistency, like choosing integrity when no one is watching, like staying responsive even when progress feels slow. You are prepared for that now. The ancient words recorded in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 8, verse 2. Speak directly to this moment. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness, not part of the way. Not only the pleasant stretches, all the way, every turn, every delay, every unseen protection. Remembering is not nostalgia, it is grounding. It keeps you humble. It keeps you grateful. It keeps you aligned. As you look back, you can see that nothing was wasted. The confusion taught discernment. The silence taught trust. The separation taught clarity. The tests taught allegiance. The unseen steps taught faith. And now, the arrival teaches stewardship. This message, this journey does not exist in isolation. Others are walking similar paths, often without language for what they are experiencing. If this has resonated with you, if it has given shape to something you felt but couldn't name, consider responding in a simple, sincere way. Liking the video helps this message reach those who may need reassurance rather than answers. Sharing it can bring perspective to someone who feels lost in a quiet season. Subscribing allows you to stay connected as these messages continue to unfold with depth and intention. These actions are not about numbers. They are about continuity, about building a space where guidance is respected, not rushed, where faith is explored honestly, not sensationalized, where growth is honored as a process, not a performance. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not unclear. You are being led wisely, patiently, purposefully. And you no longer need to understand everything to trust where you are going. What matters now is not speed, but faithfulness. And you are walking it well. You don't need a final answer to carry this forward. Some journeys are not meant to be wrapped up neatly because life itself keeps unfolding. What matters is that something inside you has shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. You now recognize that being led does not always feel powerful in the moment it feels faithful. It feels quiet. It feels like choosing to trust even when certainty never fully arrives. You are free to take this message with you in whatever way serves you. You don't have to respond immediately. You don't have to explain what it meant. Sometimes the deepest work happens after the words stop, when reflection settles and clarity forms slowly, naturally. If at some point you feel moved to like or share this, let it be because it genuinely resonated, not out of obligation, not out of pressure. Let it be an extension of alignment, not a task. And if you simply sit with it and carry it forward silently, that matters just as much. You are allowed to walk on without noise, without announcements, without needing to prove that anything changed. What was meant to land has landed, and what is meant to continue will.